Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts for the G-Forces podcast. So this upcoming weekend is the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, which people also call the Imola Grand Prix. It is the other Grand Prix in Italy. We did not have this race last year because there was a really bad storm that ended up flooding the entire town of Imola, I believe. So it ended up having to get canceled. So this is the first race since 2022. Is it 2024? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I should remember what year it was. This is the first time we've raced there since 2022. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for those that haven't watched it like us,
I don't know what to expect.
I don't know what to expect.
The only bits and pieces that I've seen of this racetrack were in the Senna documentary that we watched.
Yeah, I will say from the research that we've done and just kind of, looking into some of the drivers, there's a huge wealth of history at this track. So I feel like really most of the European tracks, I'm trying to think what the newest one is, but I feel like a lot of them are pretty rich in their history and kind of important moments, but Imola itself is very, very important to the racing community.
Yeah, there were a bunch of Schumacher wins at this track that are pretty historical. There was a bunch of, I think Senna won here a few times, so it was very historical. This is also, unfortunately, the racetrack that Aryton Senna passed away on, so that's why you will notice a bunch of drivers and teams are going to be doing some dedicated things to him this weekend. One thing in particular that you'll notice is the yellow helmet. A bunch of the drivers are doing a signature, special yellow helmet. I know Pierre is doing that. I think a bunch of the others are going to do it as well. Yeah. I don't know what year was it 1994 that he passed?
Mm-hmm. It's the 30th anniversary. Yeah,
so it's the 30th anniversary, so I think that's why it's extra big this year to do something in honor of him. But because of that, we have promised a special Aryton Senna episode for a while now. This is not going to be that episode, but MC is going to be doing a quick breakdown of his career, but just a short one, and we will hopefully have an episode that's solely talking about the documentary at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think that as new fans, Senna is someone that we heard about all the time.
Yeah.
I think just in sports, Aryton Senna is one of those names that kind of is up there with, I feel like Kobe and Tiger Woods, and I feel like they're
he is definitely.
They're the guys. I hate being. They're the goats.
Yeah, he definitely is one of the goats.
And so I think that there is just a huge. He is the role model for a lot of drivers, and we just kind of wanted to give a really high level overview because
he definitely is the main role model for so many of the drivers.
So many.
I remember last year a bunch of them did stuff in honor of him, and eventually I was like, one of y'all has to have a different role model, guys. Y'all can't all idolize the same driver. But, after watching the documentary, I really understand. I mean, when we first got into this, Senna and Prost were names that we heard of, and Schumacher was the name that we heard of, but we didn't really know much about them. And I knew that he was, Senna in particular was a very, successful and, special driver.
Yeah.
But, until we watched the documentary, I really did not understand the actual size of his impact that he had on the sport of F1 and motorsports in general.
So for those that are new, we wanted to kind of give you that spark-noted version of his life to understand what's going on, understand who the figure is behind a lot of the driver's inspiration, but also to kind of impress your friends and show that you know a little bit.
Yeah, when all the bros ask you what DRS is, you could be like, do you know who Aryton Senna is?
Yeah. Do you know how many championships he's won? Because I do.
And then I'm going to go over the 1989 race that was at this track, which is actually, it was called the San Marino GP at the time. It was the Enzo Di Ferrari track, which is this track. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why it was called the San Marino GP at that point and not the Emilia Romagna. Maybe it's all called the same thing and it's just a really long Italian name. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like the San Marino Emilia Romagna Imola Grand Prix.
Yeah, it might be.
And then with Enzo Ferrari thrown in there somewhere. But yeah, I'm gonna be talking about the 1989 race. Wasn't too crazy, but it did have Prost and Senna in it. And it actually has a F1 record, which I will talk about when I get there. And if you think of any of the news that's been going on in F1 over the last week or so, we might bring that up at the end. Who knows?
Has there been any news?
I think there's been rumors.
Since the Lando win, yeah, there's been it's another 2-week stint. So
yeah, the 2 weeks in between races is going to be ending soon because then it's going to be it's going to start being like back to back to back, which I don't necessarily mind sometimes. The gaps in between are kind of throwing me off because I'm mentally in F1 headspace and then I'm like, wait, we got 2 weeks. What do I do?
We have a whole weekend.
I know. Anyways, we're going to get into it.
Alrighty, so Aryton Senna was born on March 21st, 1960 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He was actually Senna de Silva when he was born. He dropped the de Silva later on when he joined F1.
I feel like that makes sense. I feel like a lot of Spanish, Portuguese names are pretty long.
Yeah, a lot of them will shorten them. Senna grew up quite comfortably in Brazil. His family was pretty well off. His father was a factory owner and a landowner, so I believed they had quite a bit of land, including farmland. He had 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. His sister, I feel like I read a lot more about his sister's involvement because she's involved in the Senna, the foundation. But didn't really look into his brother, but that's for the documentary day when we go deeper. And he took an interest in cars early on. His father gave him a miniature go-kart at the age of 4, and that is apparently when the obsession hit. I think he was just able to, what 4-year-old wouldn't love a miniature go-kart?
100%.
Apparently by the time he was 7, he was driving a Jeep around the family farm, so I feel like a lot of these guys,
so many of them,
learn at, before they hit double digits, and it just goes on from there. Senna started racing in go-karts in Brazil at the age of 13. He won the South American Kart Championship in 1977 and would go on to compete in the Karting World Championship, placing second in 79 and 1980. In 1981, Senna decided to move to England to pursue single-seat racing. So I think, we see, again, typically, all of the drivers that aren't originally from
they basically have to
England
move to
or Europe,
England or somewhere in Europe.
They move to continue, into the lower levels of single-seat racing. During this time, Senna was having a lot of success, but was struggling with the decision to take over the family business. So I think that there was a lot of discussion of
Maybe
whether...
that's where his brother is.
Maybe. But what ended up happening was that he was invited to join the Formula Ford 2000 team, and that ultimately made the decision. He was like, I gotta go to England and race.
Sorry to interrupt, but something that just hit me. He was born in 1960, which means he would have been the same age as our parents.
I know. Basically. I thought the same thing when I was doing the research. He is our parents' age.
For some reason, it always felt like he was so much older.
I think because he passed so young, I think of him so young. So I don't think of him as older. But it's because I just feel like
it was so long ago. But the image I see of him is obviously his young self. Anyways, sorry to sidetrack.
So he was invited to join the Formula Ford 2000 team, and that ultimately made the decision on whether he would join the family business or go on racing. Obviously, we know he continued to race. Senna won the 1982 British and European Formula Ford Championships, and in 1983 moved to British Formula 3 and won that championship. So, I feel like just early on from this point, I mean, he's not even in Formula One yet.
He's already winning.
He's not having, his first season he placed 7th. It's like, no, he came in, he's second or he's first.
Yeah.
Senna debuted in F1 in 1984. His success in the earlier leagues caught the attention of a lot of teams. Apparently, like, a ton of people wanted him. But he ended up signing with Tolman. The 1984 Monaco Grand Prix was a standout race for his rookie season. This race was faced with torrential rain, and Senna was able to place right behind another established driver, Aryton Prost. It was like a huge, huge moment. And also, I think that this kind of showed, this is that first taste for Senna fans when they were watching him, to kind of see, like, he thrived in these chaotic, like, he loved rain.
The chaos.
He loved rain. Like, he did so well that there were multiple races where, like, his performance just kind of put everyone else to shame.
Yeah.
And I really just, I don't know if it was just, like, he was willing to take those risks or skill or an amalgamation of both.
I mean, you have that famous quote from him where it's something like, if you no longer look for a gap, then you're not a race car driver.
Yeah.
He's the one who said that.
He said a few things along the lines of, like I think a lot of him and Prost's drama was kind of along when is it too far? And I think that was a huge conversation when Senna was driving, was like, when is it, dangerous? When is it, pushing the line?
Yeah.
In 1985, Senna would end up moving to Lotus, where he would experience his first win at the Portuguese Grand Prix. So he didn't win any races in his first season with Tolman, but his second season, shifting teams, we saw that win. Senna would stay with Lotus for 3 seasons, starting from pole 16 times and winning 6 Grand Prix in total. In 1988, Senna moved to McLaren, making him teammates with his massive rival, Aryton Prost. I believe McLaren was where he was the longest. I think it was 6 of his seasons he was at McLaren. Fueled with the need to be on top, Senna won half of the 16 races that season, so in the 1988 season, and bagged pole every single race but 3. So very reminiscent of, drivers acts we see today. 1988 was the first year that Senna won the Drivers' Championship. As we see, bagged pole every single race but 3.
Well, and the way that points were awarded and, like, the Drivers' Championship was decided at this time was, like, your top 12 performances or something like that. And so for him to have won half of the races and gotten pole 16 times, I don't know how many races there were that season, but...
There were, I think, 16 races. There were 16 races that season.
So for the majority of the races, he won, I would say then. So then, of course, it makes sense that he would win the championship.
Yeah. So, like they're going to do a few times, so 88, Senna won, and then in 1989, Prost won after a bad takeout in Suzuka. They loved to, as Emma talked about one of their races in Suzuka.
I think it was the 1989.
1989. They, loved to just take each other out, specifically at Suzuka. In 1990, Senna took his second championship. Prost had moved to Ferrari that season after the tension became too much with them both on McLaren. They did not get on. And Senna took out Prost's Ferrari at Suzuka that year as, a thank you.
Yeah, they really just wanted to fight each other at Suzuka, I feel like.
I feel like it was just, I
think it was the last race of the season for them almost every year. And so I think they were just done. Because, when we got to the end of the season last year, I was like, I might kill someone.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how the drivers are feeling.
Yeah, so definitely, it was, I'm sure spectators loved the drama.
Oh, yeah.
1991, Senna received his 3rd title, but in 1992 and 1993, McLaren struggled when they switched from Hondas to underpowered Ford units. So he didn't really, McLaren had this, peak moment, and then just, car changes really affected them. In 1993, though, during the European Grand Prix at Donington Park, he claimed an incredible victory during a rain-soaked Grand Prix. The first lap of the race is legendary and deemed lap of the gods. It's actually kind of spectacular. If you Google Senna Lap of the Gods, F1.com actually has the clip from 93 with the pundits talking over it. And he moves from P5 to P1 in rain within, 15 seconds.
That's wild.
And just, I think the crazy thing, too, is that every other car kind of looked like newborn moving. Deers. They were, they could not figure out, and he was just, confidence. So it actually is an incredible, if anyone has a second, I would definitely look up Lap of the Gods Senna. It's the 93 at Donington Park. In 1994, Senna decided to move to Williams as McLaren had not been performing, and he felt like he needed to move teams to continue to win.
Well, and Williams was doing really well at this point.
They had won the last two drivers' championships, 92 and 93, and therefore Senna decided to move on.
Painful for us now.
Unfortunately, as Williams do be doing, there were big technical... Well, it's not on them. It's
this was this was a regulation change because they had been doing so well and they had a different suspension thing.
It had a deal... I don't know. It
was like an electric suspension.
Yeah.
And they could change it, in the middle of the race where it was a little weird.
I read about it in, the book that I was reading. They had a whole talk about it.
The Braun one?
Yeah, Braun's book. Anyways, there were big technical regulation changes that year, and Senna personally struggled to adapt to the car. He achieved pole in the 3 races he was at, but unfortunately didn't complete a single race that he entered. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix was a very, very dark weekend in Formula One, and honestly, I think in the motorsport world as a whole. Yeah. During qualifying that weekend, rookie Roland Ratzenberger was killed in a crash. It was only his 3rd F1 race ever. I believe he was 33. The following day, on May 1st, during the Grand Prix, Senna passed away when he hit the wall at the Tamburello corner. There had not been a death at a Grand Prix in 12 years, and 8 years since a testing accident had claimed a driver. Senna was only 34. In his 10 years in the sport, Senna achieved the following: 65 pole positions, he made 161 starts, he scored more than 600 points, it was around 610. He was on the podium 80 times. He won 41 races, and he was a 3 times world champion in 1988, 1990, and 1991. They estimate over 500,000 people showed up to his funeral, including his rival Aryton Prost, who was a funeral.
He was a pallbearer.
Who was a pallbearer at the funeral. By the time he died, it was estimated that Senna had given roughly $400 million. I don't know if it was American dollars or I unfortunately don't know the currency in Brazil, of his personal fortune to help provide a better future for the underprivileged in Brazil. And then a few months after his passing, the Senna family, with I think his sister Vivian in charge, created the Senna Foundation, and they're still active, hugely active in the motorsport world today.
Alan Prost is a chairman of it as well.
Yeah, but honestly, I literally, after reading all this, I read a few articles. F1.com has a bunch on him. Drivers Hall of Fame. His the Senna Foundation is mostly in Portuguese, their website. Yeah. But there's a ton of articles on him. And at the end of it, I kind of Googled why does everyone love Senna? Obviously through this, it's incredible, but the one thing that was always talked about was just his absolute passion about the sport, that apparently he would be up with the mechanics, he would be tinkering with his car, he would get to know the crews, he really put his all. And I think it's something, when we talk about the documentary, there are so many races where you just see him physically unable to lift the trophy because he
so
was so tired. And I think the things that he was able to achieve during certain races, the moves he was able to do compared to other drivers, like, it was just, like, it was talent unlike ever seen before.
100%.
So, you know, definitely an incredible career. You know, my quick 15 minutes does not do his life justice for everything that he achieved and did, and we'd love to continue to deep dive into him, and we will. But obviously, it is a very sensitive weekend, I think.
Yeah.
But it's also, like, he was an incredible driver. And
which is why I think he's a lot of the current drivers' idol. That, like,
I also think, too, seeing how much he did for his home. Like,
that was something that they expressed so much in, like, articles and stuff. Anything that you read about him, they talk so much about he loved Brazil and how he wanted to help the people of Brazil in any way that he could.
Well, and I think, you know, he was such an inspiration to so many people in Brazil, and just knowing how many people turned out for, you know, his funeral, it really shows, like, you know, it was like when Princess Di passed, like, it rocked Brazil, and it really rocked the world.
Yeah, I've seen, like, news clips of the day that he had passed, and, like, for us growing up, we didn't watch motorsports, so, like, we didn't pay attention to anything.
He also drivers passed
at all. But, like, but I'm saying, like, if drivers passed while we were growing up, we didn't really pay attention because we didn't know what was going on. But, like, I think that he was one of those names that, like, you would hear and you would know who it is. Like, they would say, like, this, like F1 world champion Aryton Senna has passed. Like, I think people knew who that was.
Yeah. But an incredible career. I mean, just the speed that he had alone, the things he was able to accomplish, just an incredible driver and someone we'll continue to look into and research on.
Well, and his death is the cause, basically, of all of the safety regulations that we see today. There were a lot of times where he had to fight for just basic safety regulations, and you'll see that in videos. And I think, weirdly enough, there's been actually a lot of crashes at the corner that he crashed in and passed away at. And I don't know if that corner still exists in the same way today.
I mean, it's definitely a dangerous track.
I mean, I think it's a dangerous track.
Like, and I think that there are some that just are like that, unfortunately.
Like Spa.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, they're driving rocket ships. Even back then, I mean, I feel like just the fuel situation alone, you know, back then. But I think that, you know, the crashes even prior to this, like, they were bad.
They were really, really bad crashes.
And, you know, to know that this happened in 94 and to even see, you know, the steps they've taken, you know, it's horrific that, you know, someone had to pass for these regulations to be put in place. Yeah. But, you know, I think that overall, his legacy and what he's left, you know, on the grid and even off the grid as a person, you know, I get it.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
What an inspiration. But, yeah.
All right, I'm going to get into the 1989 San Marino Grand Prix. So in 1989, the San Marino Grand Prix was the second race of the season. I believe the first race of the season was the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Senna had actually lost that race. Yeah, unfortunate for him. But he qualified on pole. Alan Prost qualified P2, and Nigel Mansell qualified P3. Nigel Mansell is another name that you'll probably hear a lot in F1. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever really done a ton of research on him, but I've heard his name a million times. We need to learn a bit more about him.
We need to expand our drivers.
So both McLarens, which were Senna and Prost, they had a good start off of off the start.
Wow.
But Senna ended up out in front. I mean, he was on pole, so it makes sense. But then when we got to lap 3, Gerard Berger actually crashed in the Tamburello corner, and his Ferrari caught on fire while he was still in it. Somehow, by the grace of God, he came out with only burns on his hands, second-degree burns, but only burns on his hands, and, like, a broken rib or two.
Wow.
Somehow. They did have an hour break before they had the restart, because they obviously had to get the fire out, get the driver out, and clean up the track. So it takes a long time to do that. But Prost took the lead off the start, but then Senna passed him before the first lap was over. This was where the controversy of their teammate relationship really started. They were already a little edgy because of 1988, but 1989 was really, like, the ending of it, of where Prost was like, I need to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So basically, apparently, before the race started, Prost and Senna had made a team agreement that whoever got out first would take the lead and the other driver would not fight. They would let them have the lead.
Oh, God.
Senna saw it as, it's a restart. It's not the start. We can fight.
Oh, no.
And Prost was like, no, it's still a start. I'm out in front. And then Senna fought him and passed him in like a sneaky turn, like in like not the nicest of ways, but also, like Senna said, if you're not looking for a gap, are you really a race car driver anymore?
Savage.
So yeah, this infuriated Prost, and Senna just didn't want to listen to it. Again, Senna felt that since it was a restart, they could fight for it anyway. And I believe his radio message back to his engineer was that he didn't want a decorative competition. He really just wanted to win. And now to some of the other drivers that are on the grid. Patrese, I think that's how you say his name, jumps to 3rd place. Nannini, who started in 7th, actually took 4th place. And then Nigel Mansell fell to 5th. Then on the 6th lap, Mansell overtook Nannini. And then Mansell, being excited by the crowd because it's Italy and he was a Ferrari driver, so you got the intense tifosi, was super excited, and then he climbed to 3rd. But then we get to lap 21, and Patrese ended up retiring. His Renault engine ended up breaking down. And then Nigel Mansell retired lap 23 because of a gearbox failure. And then we get to a couple laps later, and Nelson Piquet and Mauricio Gugelmin ended up retiring as well. So all these retirements were really worked in McLaren's favor because they had all this time between them and the cars behind them.
Do you know how many retirements total? Was that 5
I did look at it, but there was a lot. I forgot to write down the exact number. But in the end, 12 laps to go, actually. Prost spun out. And luckily was able to return to the track still in 2nd because there was so much gap between them and the cars behind them because of all of the retirements. Apparently he was really lucky not to end up in like the gravel trap, and that he very nearly missed it and was able to get back onto the track. But because of that and everything else, Senna actually won the race by more than 40 seconds. Which is, I don't know if Max has really won races by that much. Like, it's been, like, upwards to, like, 30. I don't know about 40, though.
Yeah, I would have to look up, like, a list of, like, biggest, like, race ending gaps.
But they were the only two, Senna and Prost were the only two to finish all of the laps of the race. Everybody else, like, they lapped everybody else.
Yeah, I had heard that.
This was a very quick summary of it because the main thing was just Senna kind of being a savage and was like, no, I don't really care. And then this was actually the record that they still have to today.
Yeah.
They were 39 entries in this race.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Which, obviously, not all of them were on the track at the same time. You have to. That's what qualifying was quite literally for in the past, to not just get your place on the grid, but also to actually get into the race. So there were a lot of teams that existed in the past that just, like, did not make it to actual races. So that was the 1989 San Marino Grand Prix. This was only the second race of the season. So at this point, I believe Prost was actually ahead of Senna in the championship. And ended up beating him for the championship in the end because of Suzuka. But I think Senna came like second in the championship, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
But yeah, that is the 1989 San Marino Grand Prix. Didn't want to go too deep into it because there's 39 people racing in this. So if I had gone into extreme depth, then we would have been hearing a lot of different names. Which, actually, because there were so many different names, there were drivers from countries that, like, I've never really seen before.
Really? Like, where?
At this point, there was a Japanese driver. Don't remember them talking about a Japanese driver at all at this point in time. I don't think his team was very good, so he probably didn't make it to any races.
Yeah, no, I think there were Japanese drivers, like, obviously, like, on lower leagues at that point, lower
Yeah, but in F1.
I don't know. I'd have to double check, but yeah, you might be right.
I think there was a few other countries where I was like, didn't know about that one. But also, both Ferraris did not finish this race, which in Italy, for both Ferraris to not finish the race,
yeah,
it's kind of a crime.
Do you think the Tifosi at this Italian Grand Prix is going to be smaller or the same? I
think it's going to be similar to Monza. I think because this track is like the Enzo Ferrari track.
Okay.
I think it is going to be quite big.
And I feel like they're going to come out in full force because of last year, support for the community,
yeah.
You can see it being...
Well, and at the 1989 Grand Prix, even though it was Italy, Senna still was kind of being mobbed by people after the race, even though all the drama that was going on. So he apparently spent, like, the entire rest of the day after the race in the garage or, like, the McLaren trailer and, like, barely left because he could not leave the trailer without being, like, mobbed by people.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it just goes to show you how big of a driver he really was. Yeah, I don't really have much to add to this one. It was a nice, short little race. I mean, most of the people ended up not finishing, so...
Yeah, I made easy
but
reporting.
yeah, like I said before, the Tamburello corner, it seems like there were a lot of crashes in that corner.
Yeah, I'm gonna, when I do the track info, I'm gonna look a little bit into, like, that corner specifically to see, because I know some of the courses have changed slightly.
Because of all this.
Because of, like, I think Mexico has changed slightly to be a little bit safer. Like, they'll change the corners.
The drivers want some of Spa to change.
Plus, the other thing is, too, like, you know, for those, like, there are, I mean, this is, like, the stupidest thing I'm about to say, but, like, if you look at the video clips from back in the 90s, like the late 80s, the cars are very different than what they are today. And so that's the other thing, is that some of the tracks have had to change just because the cars are so freaking different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll definitely see if if they've changed it at all, I would imagine. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get into our final thoughts. This past weekend in Monaco, I know that the Monaco E-Prix, so the Formula E race, was recently...
Well, and then there was that water E race going on in Venice with those, like, boats that Tom Brady... Did you see that with Laura Winters?
Anything involving Tom Brady, I don't care about.
Okay, well, it doesn't just involve Tom Brady, but
I
that's,
know,
like, another E. But it's, like, boat versions of, like, I don't know. I'll have to look into it.
But the Monaco E-Prix, I think, happened, like, earlier this weekend, and then because the track was already, like, set up and everything, they had some of the... It wasn't the Goodwood Festival of Speed, but I think it had to, relate to Goodwood because they had some of the older, like, 1980s, 1990s F1 cars, and they drive them on the Monaco circuit.
Yeah.
And people were... the videos that I saw, people were like, POV, it's 1990... You're drinking, like, a fancy cocktail, watching the Monaco Grand Prix. And I'm like, must be nice. I'm in Tennessee.
Hey, one day. We'll get there.
I know. One day when we have $40,000 to throw at Monaco.
When we're 80.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
if the world still exists then.
Okay.
But it looked very cool. I really wish that we could have been there. If you want to invite us next time, feel free.
Oh my God.
And then this past weekend, so some of you guys might notice that a lot of the F1 Academy girls are actually racing in like British Formula 4 or even some of Formula 3 this season as well, because the race weekends don't necessarily overlap and the cars are very similar. And so, Abby Pulling this past weekend actually was the first woman to win a British F4 race, which is super awesome. And I think is just another step in the right direction.
Well, and that's the thing is that there's always been the group of people that are like, well, it's they're not against like the men in F1 Academy, or like the cars are different, like they're not.
It's just giving people experience.
It's giving the experience. It's like, I look at it like it's not it's a resume booster.
Yeah.
But it's giving them track time that they might not necessarily have. And
which we've been told a million times that is everything. Track time is everything.
But I definitely think that this just proves that, like, you know, I mean, like we've seen with other female drivers, you know, I think we're going to see a lot more up in the fields.
Well, and another thing happened that's very exciting in women in motorsport. Mary Catherine, take it away.
Yeah, so it was all over. We, unfortunately, don't have the bandwidth right now to follow IndyCar super duper closely. We'll be honest with you, we've wanted to.
I follow them on Instagram very closely.
But Indy Next is their...
Indy Next is basically like the F2 of IndyCar.
And Jamie Chadwick, who is a female driver in Indy Next, just placed third, her first career podium. So
well, and Jamie Chadwick is the driver who won all of the W Series each year when it was a championship. And she actually does come to F1 Academy stuff. I believe she's an advisor for one of the teams. But I remember in Miami seeing her somewhere with headphones on, like on the grid wall. So she definitely has some involvement with F1 Academy. Yeah, I think she's probably a very good role model for a lot of these drivers because she was in their position only 5 years ago. So, and now that she's just podiumed in an Indy Next race, usually at that point you've got like another year or two, and if a spot opens up, you might make it to IndyCar or somewhere else. So huge for women in motorsport. Hopefully we'll get new commentators next time. We'll see.
Emma wants better F1 Academy.
Well, I just think if we
at the track, we like what we hear.
If we have like Alex Brundle talking to us, viewing it through our televisions, why can't the people on the track have Alex Brundle telling them stuff?
I wonder if it's like a contract thing with the track.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know how that works.
No idea.
Anyways,
I'm not a lawyer. Don't really know how contracts work.
I don't know how that world of organizing it works either. I don't really. But anyways,
I think that's everything for today. It's a nice quick episode. I'm very excited for this weekend. I think it's going to be a really good race. And I believe because it's back in Europe, we are going to have our typical race weekend where we have things kind of early in the morning for us, not like quite literally in the middle of the night like we had in some of the Asian races. But this one, I believe we're going to have like practice at like 6:30 in the morning, qualifying probably at like 7 a.m.
The race is at noon. Not noon.
Not noon, like 8 a.m. or
8
9?
a.m. It's 8 a.m. No. FP2 is 10 a.m.
Yeah, that's usually what I feel like the European ones are.
I love watching Formula 1 with my breakfast.
There's something about like an 8 a.m. race that is so satisfying for me because I wake up at 6:30 to walk my dog on the weekends, then I can go back, take a quick little nap.
I just like watching Formula 1 with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I like watching the race with my breakfast, my cup of coffee. I might be like getting ready to go to the pool at the same time. It's such a calming experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm very happy for this timing again.
All right. Well, that's all I have.
Make sure to check out all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and wherever you want to stream your podcasts. I think that's everything.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yes, please. Always. Very important for us.
Yeah. We will see you guys after the Grand Prix.
Yes. All right. Bye, guys.